Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons and love are told. Don't forget to like, share with your friends, and subscribe for more stories that will keep your heart racing and your mind reflecting. I never imagined that a single evening would rearrange my life in ways both brutal and strangely liberating. My name is Celine. For nearly 8 years I had been the lead system architect at Etherlink, a company that prided itself on precision, scalability, and trust. I lived and breathed its codebase, weaving threads of logic into something living, resilient, and elegant. My team trusted me, and in quiet corners of late-night sprints, even the founder used to call me the spine of the system. I didn't think he was exaggerating. I knew every dependency, every fragile junction where one wrong line could ripple through millions of users. But on the night it all began, none of that mattered. Because I had chosen family over appearances, loyalty over flattery, and the CEO didn't forgive that. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the memo dropped mandatory attendance at the birthday celebration of Claudia, the CEO's wife. The tone was smug, as if it were a privilege to be summoned. All senior staff presence is required. Attendance will be logged. I read the line twice, my jaw tightening. That same evening my younger sister, Mariel, had finally gathered the courage to leave her abusive husband. I had promised her that I would be there, parked outside her apartment with the engine running, ready to take her and her little boy to safety. She had been whispering plans to me for weeks, and I had sworn I wouldn't let her down. And now this ridiculous corporate demand was standing in my way. I stared at the email for a long moment, weighing the glittering ballroom against my sister's shaking hands. In truth, there was no contest. Family first, that was the principle I lived by, the same one that quietly influenced how I built every part of Etherlink's architecture. Systems, like people, should have safe exits, clear transitions, a way to move on without destruction. And if you didn't respect that, things fell apart. When the evening came, I drove past the lit towers downtown where my colleagues were already gathering in their sequin dresses and tailored suits. I didn't care. My sister's apartment was dim, her figure hunched at the door with 2 bags and her son clutching her hand. The boy's eyes widened when he saw me, like I was a lifeline. "Come on," I whispered. "We're leaving." We didn't stop until we were 3 neighborhoods away, and she collapsed into tears of relief in the back seat. My hands shook on the steering wheel, but my chest felt steady. I had chosen right. The next morning my ID badge didn't open the glass doors. At first I thought it was a glitch, some database lag. But then Marcus, the security guard, shifted uncomfortably and said, "Celine, you've been terminated. Orders from upstairs. You're not allowed inside. Terminated. No meeting. No hearing. No chance to explain." Just like that, 8 years erased because I missed the wife's birthday toast. I walked back to my car numb. My phone buzzed with a cold HR email. Effective immediately, your employment has been discontinued for non-compliance with executive directives. That was it.
No severance. No conversation.
No acknowledgement of my work. I sat there in the parking lot with my laptop on my knees, breathing slowly. And then, for the first time in years, I thought of the code I had written that no one else fully understood. Schedule E. It wasn't sabotage. I would never destroy what I built. It was a failsafe buried deep in the trust layers of the system, designed for one purpose: to ensure that if someone with my level of access was ever removed without the proper offboarding sequence, the system would protect itself. Dependencies would start to withhold validation tokens. Certain scripts would quietly pause. The platform wouldn't crash, not immediately. It would unravel in silence, like a tapestry slowly losing its threads. I had coded it years ago after a scare when another engineer left without documentation, leaving us scrambling. I called it family first in my private notes, because the principle was simple: clean transitions matter. If you cut someone out abruptly, the system would demand reconciliation. Sitting there in my car, I realized the CEO had triggered it. By firing me without offboarding, he had lit the fuse. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was simply the architecture keeping faith with the values I had given it. The rage came later. At first, I only felt hollow, staring at my empty desk through the glass wall as someone from HR boxed up my things. They didn't even let me pack my own memories. My nameplate, the framed photo of Mariel and her boy. The small potted plant my team had given me on my 5th anniversary went into a cardboard box, like trash. My phone kept buzzing with Slack messages that I couldn't access anymore. By noon, even my personal laptop was locked out of the company network. But none of them realized that my access tokens, the root-level keys, still pulsed quietly in the architecture. No one had followed the checklist I wrote myself for years. Always retire architect keys with ceremony, because trust once broken doesn't heal on its own. That night, I tucked Mariel and her son into the guest room of my apartment. She whispered, "I don't know how to thank you." I shook my head. We protect each other. Always. When she slept, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop, connecting to the company's public dashboards. I wasn't touching the system. Schedule E didn't require my hand. It was already awake. The health checkboard, normally pristine, showed a faint yellow alert on a background job queue. A minor thing. Harmless for now. I leaned back in my chair, my heart strangely calm. The CEO thought he had cut me off, but he had only planted the seed of his own undoing. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. By the end of that first week, I could almost feel the company twitching. It started small, just as I had expected. A health check alert here, a delayed validation process there. To an outsider, it might have looked like nothing more than ordinary hiccups on a large-scale platform. But I knew better. I had designed the system to unravel slowly, like a sweater coming apart thread by thread. That way, the cause wouldn't be obvious until it was too late. And sure enough, the engineers were chasing shadows, patching dashboards and rerunning jobs, not realizing the foundation beneath their feet was quietly crumbling. I would sit at my kitchen table with my coffee, watching the metrics update in real time on the public uptime monitors. My sister Mariel would sometimes glance at the screen and ask, "Is that them?" I'd nod, and she'd smirk faintly, like she understood on some level that this was the shape of justice. Her boy would play quietly on the carpet, his laughter oddly soothing against the background of corporate chaos. For once, I wasn't the one scrambling to fix everything. I was simply watching. By the second week, reports began to lock up. The executive dashboards that Claudia, yes, the same CEO's wife whose birthday I had skipped relied on for her vanity charity projects, refused to load. I could imagine her frustration, pacing in heels while the analytics spun endlessly. Then came the validation failures. Clients began complaining that their transactions weren't clearing. Their records stuck in limbo. The legal department issued stiff warnings about compliance risks, because in industries like ours, even a day of invalid reporting could draw regulators. The beauty of Schedule E wasn't destruction. It was silent. The system didn't shout alarms. It simply withheld, quietly refusing to validate what hadn't been transitioned cleanly. Without my retirement protocol, there was no full trust chain, and without trust, nothing in the system could fully settle. I had written it with love, not malice. But in this moment, it served as the most poetic revenge I could have asked for. I heard about the fallout not from the company directly. They had cut me off entirely, but from whispers that reached me through friends who still worked there. One engineer, Adrian, called me late at night, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "Celine, what's happening? The system keeps rejecting itself. We've triple-checked code, rerun migrations, nothing works. It's like the architecture is punishing us." I bit my tongue, heart aching for him. Adrian had been kind to me, always bringing me coffee during long sprints. He didn't deserve this storm, but I also knew I couldn't explain. "I'm not sure," I murmured carefully. "Maybe there's something missing in your offboarding processes?" He was quiet and then sighed. "We don't even know what that means anymore. They just cut you out."
No handover. No checklist.
Nothing. The CEO, Damien, was too proud to admit it, but I knew he was seething. His emails, some leaked to me by an old colleague, grew shorter, angrier. Words like unacceptable, incompetence, and fix this immediately splattered across the page. But no matter how much he shouted, the system didn't obey him. It only recognized trust, and he had severed the chain himself. By the third week, investors began to notice. Etherlink's uptime, usually boasted about in quarterly reports, dropped just enough to raise eyebrows. Key clients threatened to leave. Regulators demanded explanations. The legal team, in a panic, drafted hollow statements about temporary issues due to scaling. I laughed softly when I read one in a public blog post. Scaling had nothing to do with it. The issue was simple. You don't fire your architect without ceremony and expect the house to stand. One evening, Mariel found me staring at the metrics again. Do you feel bad? She asked gently. Watching them struggle like this? I thought for a long moment before answering. Bad? No. But conflicted, maybe. The engineers are good people. They're the ones paying the price for Damien's arrogance. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. But you didn't make this happen. He did. You gave everything to them, and he discarded you for his ego. This is just the world showing him his own reflection. Her words sank deep, like a bomb I hadn't realized I needed. By the fourth week, the unraveling reached its peak. Reports froze completely. Transaction queues overflowed. Data integrity became a looming concern one more week after this, and regulators could impose fines so steep the company might never recover. And still, no one had managed to trace the root cause. I had buried Schedule E so deeply, written it so elegantly into the trust fabric, that even their best minds couldn't isolate it without me. The founder, Elias, finally returned. He had stepped back years earlier, leaving Damien to run the day-to-day, but word spread that he had flown back in from his villa abroad, furious at the state of his company. I almost smiled when I heard. Elias was shrewd, and he knew exactly how much of the architecture bore my fingerprints. If anyone could recognize the shape of my design, it was him. Sure enough, days later, my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in years. I let it ring twice before answering. Celine, Elias said, his voice weary but urgent. We made a mistake. I leaned back in my chair, letting silence stretch just long enough for him to feel it. Then I asked softly, which mistake are you talking about? Because there were several. He exhaled. Firing you without following your offboarding process. Damien thought it was just HR paperwork. He didn't understand what you built. My chest tightened, a strange mix of vindication and sorrow. No, I said. He didn't. And now you're paying the price. Elias didn't argue. That alone told me how desperate he was. Can we meet? I'll make it worth your while. I stared at the ceiling, Mariel's laughter drifting faintly from the next room as she read her son a bedtime story. For the first time in weeks, I realized the balance had shifted. They needed me more than I had ever needed them. Elias didn't waste time. The very next morning, a sleek black car pulled up outside my apartment. For a moment I almost laughed after weeks of watching them twist in the wind. They thought sending a luxury ride would impress me. But I slid inside anyway, not for the car, not for the gesture, but because I was curious to see just how far desperation would make them bend. The driver didn't speak, and I didn't either. My hands stayed folded in my lap, calm, steady, as we cut through the city streets toward the glass tower I had once walked into every morning. Only this time, I wasn't an employee anymore. I was something much rarer. I was the only key that could unlock their disaster. The boardroom looked different when I entered, not the casual arrogance I remembered, but panic dressed in tailored suits. Faces I had known for years looked haggard, eyes ringed with sleepless nights. Damien sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, his usual smugness replaced by the brittle sheen of someone cornered. He didn't meet my eyes. It was Elias who stood and pulled out a chair for me. That, in itself, was a victory. Celine, he began carefully, we won't waste your time. We need you to fix what's broken. We're willing to reinstate you with a promotion, unlimited budget, and full creative control. His words were polished, rehearsed. But I didn't miss the way Damien's fingers drummed against the table in irritation, as if the offer itself burned him. I leaned back, crossing my arms. No. The room went silent. Even Damien's tapping stopped. Elias blinked, clearly not expecting that. No. I'm not coming back as your employee, I said evenly. I gave this company 8 years, and when I chose my family, you discarded me like nothing. That door is closed. What I will offer is a one-time consulting session. I'll recover the system, but the price is mine to set. Damien finally snapped his head up, eyes sharp. You can't be serious. You'd hold us hostage after everything we, He stopped only when Elias raised a hand to silence him. I could feel the weight of the room pressing in, the desperation behind their silence. So I spoke the number slowly, each syllable landing like a hammer. 8 figures. Paid in advance. Wire transfer. Only then do I touch a single line of code. Gasps rippled across the table. One of the legal heads muttered something about impossibility, but Elias' gaze never left mine. His eyes were steady, calculating, and then he nodded. Done. Damien nearly leapt from his chair. Elias, you can't. That's extortion. We can find another way. But Elias' voice cut him off like a blade. If there were another way, we wouldn't be here. Within an hour, confirmation of the transfer hit my phone. My account balance swelled with more money than I had ever imagined holding. A life-changing fortune. All wired because one arrogant man had underestimated what it meant to fire his architect without thought. I slid my phone back into my bag, feeling no rush, no panic, just an almost eerie calm. The balance of power had shifted completely. They set me up in a quiet office overlooking the city, but I barely needed it. Opening my laptop, I slipped back into the system like I was stepping into an old house in the dark. Every hallway, every creak of the floorboard, every soft corner, I knew it all by heart. My fingers moved quickly, bypassing layers of chaos no one else could untangle. I didn't even need to think. It was muscle memory, like a pianist playing a song she had written herself. Within minutes, I identified where Schedule had tightened its grip. Dependencies waiting endlessly for tokens that would never come. Queues circling without closure, validation routines holding their breath. I didn't break it apart, I coaxed it gently, like a knot slowly loosening beneath careful hands. For 45 minutes I worked, listening to the silence in the room grow heavier as the dashboards began to light green one by one. Reports unfroze. Validation completed. Transactions cleared. The system exhaled like a patient pulled back from the brink. When I finally leaned back, the room erupted with muted sighs of relief. Elias' shoulders dropped. Damien sat frozen, his face pale with something between humiliation and rage. He had been forced to watch me fix in under an hour what his teams hadn't solved in weeks. But I didn't bask in it. I simply closed my laptop and stood. That's it, I said quietly. You're stable now. I'll send a final report. After this, you won't hear from me again. Elias opened his mouth as if to argue, but he stopped himself, perhaps realizing that any further plea would only diminish the moment. He nodded instead, slow and solemn. Thank you, Celine. I turned toward the door. Damien finally found his voice, bitter and sharp. You think this makes you untouchable? That money won't change the fact that you betrayed us. I paused, hand on the doorframe, and looked back at him with a calm so deep it startled even me. I didn't betray anyone, I said. I protected my family. And when you fired me without respect, the system simply held you accountable to the very principles it was built on. This isn't betrayal, Damien. This is the consequence. I didn't wait for his reply. I walked out of that glass tower for the last time. Not as an employee, not as a pawn, but as someone who had written her own ending. The city air hit me like freedom. I thought of Mariel and her boy waiting at home, safe now, laughter filling my apartment. I thought of the bank notification glowing on my phone, proof that for once in my life, I had been paid what I was worth. The company would survive, I knew. They'd learn to patch the gaps, maybe even build new trust processes. But they would never forget this scar, this story of the day their arrogance cost them everything and forced them to buy back their own survival. And I would never forget that in the end, I had chosen family first and been rewarded for it. I hailed a cab instead of taking their car. The driver asked where I was headed. I smiled faintly and said home. Because that was all I ever wanted. A place where loyalty mattered, where family came first, where no CEO's ego could ever dictate the worth of my heart again. Moral lesson. Life has a way of reminding us where true loyalty should lie. In my story, it wasn't about destroying a company or humiliating a man. It was about honoring the principle that family must come before ego, before image, before empty rituals. Companies will praise you for your dedication until the moment you choose something more human than profit. And then they'll discard you. That's why we must never build our identities entirely in their hands. What I built was not sabotage, it was a mirror, showing them what happens when you forget that trust is the foundation of everything. Systems, relationships, families. Without trust, nothing stands for long. If you're listening to this, remember. Your worth is not defined by a paycheck or a title. It's defined by the choices you make when loyalty is tested. Protect those who depend on you. Stand firm when arrogance tries to silence you. And when the time comes to walk away, do it with your head high, knowing that true power lies not in revenge alone, but in choosing yourself and those you love above all else. Hello guys, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, and leave a comment about the lesson you're taking away today.